Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some sourdough discard banana bread or mini loaves. They kind of a chicken ranch chicken tenders, zesty chicken tenders with homemade ranch and a salad and cut up some fruit. So let's start by getting our banana bread down. Right before we left for our trip, I threw a bunch of bananas into our fridge so that we could have banana bread when we came back. So we're gonna get them out. We're going to mush them up. You want really, really ripe bananas. So these are turned completely brown because they were in the fridge. If you ever put a banana in the fridge, the skins will instantly turn black. So you want them nice and ripe so they're super sweet and they have great flavor. So we're going to kind of give this a quick little mix up, and then we are going to add in our sugar and our eggs. Give this a quick little mix. Kind of get it going. And then we're going to add in about a cup of brown sugar, but you don't have to pack this down. But I like it a little bit, like my original recipe that I used way back then had like a half a cup of brown sugar, but it just wasn't quite sweet enough. So we're just doing a cup, but like loosely packed. And that gives it just a bit more sweetness. So we're going to mix this in there, and this sugar should turn it to kind of like a soup. There we go. And this is going to be for our sourdough discard banana bread. Using just 2 big bananas. So it's not an overly banana flavored bread, but we're going to actually add some cinnamon and sprinkle some cinnamon sugar on the top. So it will be kind of reminiscent. Let me grab my eggs. I forgot to grab my eggs out, and I need lots of eggs today. So 2, 4, 5. I need 2 eggs for the banana bread, and we'll use 3 eggs for our chicken tenders in a little bit. But let's start with this. So we're going to add in 2 eggs. 1 and 2. And then I have a stick or a half a cup of butter melted, and it's been kind of cooling for a little bit so it won't scald the eggs right away. But we're going to add this in here as well. And I like to use butter in my baked goods over oil because I think it gives it a better texture when it's baked up and a better taste. So mix it up. I'm going to mix it until those eggs are incorporated and that butter is incorporated as well. There we go. But the interesting part about this, if you use butter instead of oil, and you can actually use them equal, like so a half a cup of melted butter versus a half a cup of oil, but the butter is going to give you a thicker batter because as it starts to kind of cool, it thickens right back up. Now we're going to add a cup of sourdough discard. And it doesn't need to be active, but if it's active, no worries. So I fed this about 2 days ago. So I'm going to put my cup in, and then we'll feed it up and hopefully be able to make a sourdough bread starting tomorrow. Kind of rehabbing it a little bit from our trip because I grab this spatula. I kept it in my cooler so I didn't have to feed it as much during the trip. And so I kept it alive there, and I've got to rehab my sourdough starter that I put in the fridge right before as well. So we got to be doing a little sourdough doctoring up, but hopefully soon we'll be back into making our yummy breads. Okay, let's mix in. Well, let's add in a teaspoon of vanilla and get all of our kind of wet and dry ingredients mixed in, except the flour. We'll do that at the very end. So we're going to add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then to dry this off, we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So 1, 2 of the baking powder. and then a half a teaspoon of the baking soda. Here we go. We're going to add this in here, and then we're going to also add in about a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm using up my pink Himalayan salt that we had on our camping trip. So we're just going to use this up. You know, when it was left out, so it's like a little bit humid, so it doesn't pour as well, but it will still be good. So we got about a half a salt in there. And then we need about a big heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'll be sprinkling cinnamon sugar over the top. So really big. I like it. Lots of that cinnamon flavor. So it's probably closer to 2, but I always just use the heaping spoonful. And now we're going to mix these in until they're incorporated. And this is where we can do a lot of good mixing. And make sure you get that baking powder completely mixed in there. Baking powder and baking soda. That way you don't have to do the step of sifting them together. You do it into the liquids right here, it mixes together much better. There we go. And now we're gonna add in our flour. So you need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So I don't use bread flour when making banana bread because it's a quick bread. And the difference between like a yeast bread and a quick bread is your leavening agents. So a quick bread uses baking soda and baking powder versus, yeast bread uses yeast and sourdough uses a starter. So I'm just using all-purpose flour in there instead of bread flour because I don't need that extra gluten. I want more of a crumbly bread versus a chewy bread. So we're going to mix this up until it's just combined. I don't want to over mix it. That will give you a stiffer banana bread. So once I start kind of seeing the flour incorporate right here, I'm going to turn off my hand or my mixer here, and then I'm going to do the rest with my spatula, because if you over mix like cakes and bread batters that use butter, it leads to a stiffer end product versus if you just barely have them mixed. That's because you're kind of creaming the butter, which will give you either like a cookie or a pie crust texture. Okay, we've got these just barely mixed together. Now we're doing mini loaves. I love to do mini loaves because they're like single serving thing, but you don't have to cook them as long and they don't overcook. So like a big loaf tends to get really dry on the outside, but has a tender middle. Mini loaves, I feel like you don't have that problem as much. It tends to be pretty moist all the way through it. But we're going to I've got a good coating of olive oil on it, but you could use Pam, or you could even take a butter packet and swirl it around. And we're going to just evenly fill this up. And then I have my oven preheated to 375. So I'm just going to kind of scoop in, and then we'll kind of go back and make sure they're all even afterwards. And then we're going to sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon sugar over the top to kind of give them a cinnamon sugar crust, which is kind of similar to the banana donuts I make, which has a cinnamon sugar like coating on it. It actually, most people, when they think of banana bread, they think of nuts or chocolate chips with it. But cinnamon is really, really, it plays well with the flavors. So we're going to scoop this in here, and now I'm going to kind of go back over and try to make them as even as possible between all of these. Because if you overfill one from the rest, that one takes longer to bake. So either that one will be underdone and the others will be over. So always try to make them as even as possible. Making a mess as usual. Here we go. And fill this out. But again, if you you could add nuts to these, like walnuts, pecans are really great in banana bread. You could also add chocolate chips. You could even add a little, some people add peanut butter to there. So you can really jazz it up a lot. Okay. Let's see. I think We've got these pretty evened out. Grab this. I'm going to wash my hands real quick. Get some of this banana bread off. And then we're going to give our tray here a little shake. And that is just going to help it kind of rest out and even. Because again, this is a thicker dough or batter because it has butter in it. And then I'm just going to do a quick cleanup around simply because it's easier to clean it up now before it's baked on than afterwards. And then in here, I have cinnamon and sugar mixed together because we eat a lot of cinnamon sugar toast. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit over the tops of each one, which will give it a nice kind of cinnamon sugar like flavor at the top. There we go. And then we're going to pop this in the oven at 375. And I'm thinking these are going to take about 22 minutes. Not as long. A regular banana bread loaf will take like an hour because it's so big. But these should be done in about 22 minutes at 375. So I'm going to set my timer. And then we can start finishing up and working on the rest of our lunch, which is some chicken tender strips. We're going to do kind of a zesty ranch flavor on it for the breading. And we're going to make a nice salad, some homemade ranch. And then I have a golden honeydew melon that we're going to cut up. So let's get this all situated here. We're going to let me prep up my chicken tenders. Yes, we'll do that. Let's actually make the seasoned flour first. That way I can just wash my hands once. So we're going to start, since I just have two big chicken tenders or chicken breasts here, we are going to fillet them in half and then I'll cut them into strips. I think I only need about 1.5 cups of flour. And now I always err on the side of having a little extra flour for my dredging and then the coating because it's better to have too much than too little, because if you have too little, then you kind of have to stop, get your hands clean, redo everything. So always just err on the side of having too much. We are going to add in about 2 tablespoons of onion powder. This is going to give them a nice savory flavor. And then make sure I put that lid on there. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of garlic salt. And then we have paprika. This is going to give it a nice kind of golden color when you fry it up. And it has a very mild, savory flavor. We're going to add about, I want to say, a tablespoon of that. It's going to give you that nice golden color. Otherwise, sometimes your chicken can have more of a blonde fry on it. And then I have got some Mrs. Dash's table blend. And we are going to add in about, I want to say a good tablespoon and a half. And I'm going to say you want to make sure you put plenty of seasonings in your chicken dredge because this is the only time you can season it up. And then we're going to add in a little bit of black pepper, about a teaspoon. So we've got all of our basic flavors for this. Let me grab a fork and we're going to mix it together. And then, let me see. We're also going to add our ranch. So I'm going to use this ranch makes, if you wanted to do straight up ranch, makes about 2 cups of ranch, but we don't need that much. So I'm going to use half of the seasoning packet in my chicken tender to give it a zesty flavor. And then the other half we're going to use to make our ranch dressing. So I'm going to kind of eyeball it. There we go. So we'll keep this over here for our ranch dressing. This will give it a nice kind of that zesty flavor to it, which is delicious. And then, of course, we'll make a lovely ranch dressing to dip it in, because who doesn't love chicken tenders and ranch dressing and a salad? I feel like they're a perfect couple. So we're going to mix this up. And this is our seasoned dredge. We will be adding some seasoned panko breadcrumbs to this about a cup later, but you want to dredge it up first. There we go. And this And make sure you mix it all up because a lot of times your spices like to hide in a little corner there. And then I'm going to mix my 3 eggs up and whip them, and then we'll prep our chicken and get ready for our dredging and then our final kind of coating on it. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. Pop my yolks here. And we're just going to whisk it until all of those are kind of mixed together. It looks like I got some of my pepper in here. That is A-okay. And you just want to mix your egg yolks together or your eggs together until you've got them well mixed, because if you leave them too loosely mixed like this, what will happen is you can get like a big string of egg white on your chicken tender, and then it's just not going to cook up right. So just try to get a good mix on them. That way you don't have any big chunks of egg whites. Okay, that's looking good. Let's set my spices over here. And now we're going to kind of prep our chicken for it. So I'm going to first fillet my chicken in half. That way my chicken strips aren't going to be super, super big. If they're really fat, then it's going to be a lot harder to cook them through evenly. Let's get this guy. I'm just trying to cut through these thickest part, make it as even as possible, but no worries if it's not. So now we've got our kind of our 4 here, and now we're going to do our little strips. And there we go. I'm kind of trying to cut along with the chicken where I see natural breaks in it so that they'll cut a little bit nicer. And then we've got our chicken just about prepped here. So we've got a good amount of chicken tenders here. Now, I will tell you they grow in size as you coat them. So they'll be about twice this size when you're done. Now let's get a quick dredge on these. And now what I always say if you're dredging on doing this, leave one hand clean, do everything with just one hand. That way if you need, I'll be like taking the lid off and stuff like that, you have a clean hand to work with. So we're dredging everything up first, and then we'll add the panko breadcrumbs to our flour here for that second coating. And this is why I said it's really important to make sure you season this flour up, because this is the only thing that is seasoning the chicken. So you might think, oh, that's a lot of spices, but it's really not. And you definitely want to make sure you do it. I feel like that's the worst, is if you under season it, because once you've kind of cooked it up, there's nothing you can really do. Here we go. Just a few left. Then we're going to actually get some of our olive oil heating up to fry them in, because these will cook up pretty quickly since they're nice and small bits and pieces. Okay, so let's coat that one a little bit more.
You have a question? What's the seasoning in the flour?
So we used garlic salt, Mrs. Dash's table blend, onion powder, paprika, black pepper, and a little bit of ranch seasoning mix. So it's going to have a nice kind of a zesty ranch flavor to it. It'll be like a savory, but it'll be lovely. Added in about a cup of seasoned panko breadcrumbs. So now we've got a nice kind of crunch to our breading. You don't have to do that. You can also use regular ones, but it does taste, I think it adds that. The panko is nice. I'm going to start heating up my olive oil over here so that it should be about ready by the time we are ready to fry these up. You don't need a huge amount of olive oil. They don't need to be completely submerged, but I try to aim for them to be about halfway submerged, or at least a third. That way you can flip it over. When you put the chicken in, of course, the oil level will rise up. In here, and then I use olive oil because the burning point you can heat it up to 350 safely for it. And I like to use one oil on everything, and I love olive oil. But you could use peanut oil, vegetable oil, Wagyu beef tallow. You could fry it in anything you wanted. Okay, let's get these guys all crunched up. Again, I always try to use just one hand for this because it's pretty messy. And then we'll put it in there. So we go into the egg wash, and that essentially it binds to the flour coating on the dredge, and then it makes like a glue that holds all of these the seasoned and the panko breadcrumbs on. So that's why you really flour it up, because otherwise this egg wash will slide right off of your chicken because it has nothing to adhere to. So this helps get you a nice kind of crispy coating on it that will stay on your chicken tender. Because nothing is worse if you take the time to make fried chicken and the crust falls off. So it's really important to do this first initial dredge. There we go. And then I always like to, of course, I bury it and then I press it on firmly. That I think just helps it stay on a little bit easier. We'll get these. And then for my oil, my goal is to heat it up to about 350. I'll know that it's ready when I put a drop of water in and it instantly sizzles. You definitely want to make sure your oil is hot enough to fry in, because if you don't, what will happen is you'll get a soggy fried chicken because it won't crisp up right away. But you want to make sure your oil is not too high, because if your oil is too hot, what will happen is when you fry it, your outside will get golden brown or maybe even burns, but your inside will be raw. So oil temperature is a key thing to kind of work with knowing it. This one's going to be a long, stringy chicken tender. It's a chicken tender snake. And coat him up. And then we'll work on our salad. We're just going to make a nice garden salad. I was hoping that some of my tomato plants would be starting to produce when we got back from our vacation, but they're still a couple of weeks out from, I do have one tomato on one plant that I need to pick. I looked at it and I was like, oh, there's just one tomato on this plant. So it's a little teeny tiny cherry tomato. A few more. But you see how the difference, I always keep one hand clean, because now if something happens, I can be right there with one hand. It takes the little training of the mind not to try to go in with both. In the beginning, that's what used to happen. I'd be like, oh no. I think, let me do a water check. I'm seeing my oil start to move, which is typically a good sign that it's nice and hot. So we'll do our quick little water. Not quite yet. So you see when I put it in, it did a little bit of a boil, but not much. It needs a little bit longer to cook or heat up, and then we'll know. Don't put a lot of water, like one drop, because the water that you don't cook off will pop in a little bit, and then you could get, you can see my little extra drop there is popping, and you can get a big sizzle and pop and hurt yourself. But one little drop is enough to see with our little sizzle test. And this should be ready to probably go in about 30 seconds. And then what I do is I start heating it up on high, but then once I put my first batch of chicken in, I turn it down to about a medium. That will keep the oil in there nice and hot, but won't continue to help it increase its temperature. One last one. Woohoo! And then we can get our first set in there, frying up. There we go. So I'm going to put my biggest chicken tenders in first, because the chicken tenders will also continue to cook after you take them out, that residual heat. So if you put your biggest chicken and tenders in there first, they'll even have the longest time to set for it afterwards. We'll have to do this in 2 batches. Let's see, we can get one more in here. Now, you don't want to overcrowd your chicken too much. You see how there's enough space between each one. That is going to allow your chicken to get a full crisp on it. If you put too much in there, it will bring the temperature of your oil down, as well as you're not going to get as good of a fry around it. Okay, let me wash my hands up here, since that likes to stick on you. Here we go. And now that we have this, I'm going to turn this sideways so I have a little bit more room. We are done with our egg wash. And then our flour dredge here always gets a little messy. And I know some people, like, they do theirs in like a bag, and they do that shake, like the shake and bake of the 90s. I find that when you do that, you don't get a really thick coating on your chicken. You get like a really thin one. So I like to do the hand dredging, which of course is a little bit more work, but I think it gives you a better product in the end. Okay, I've got these cooking at about between a 4 and a 5, not quite a 5. It's like a 4.5. And then I'm just going to be watching them for getting nice and gold. We're going to put a layer or two of paper towels on my pan right here, so that when they're ready to come out after we flip them and cook them on the other side, I'll rest them on here with the hot oil side facing down. That way they get nice and crispy and not soggy. It's really, really easy. If you put them on a flat surface without like a paper towel, they'll get soggy. So make sure you do that instead of just putting them on a pan. You could also do them on a drying rack from like, your cookie drying rack, but I find paper towels work well. And I use that paper towel then to clean up my excess oil. Let's make our ranch dressing here. Let me grab a spoon. I'm going to mix this up. We're going to do about a 1/2 cup of mayonnaise with a 1/2 cup of half and half. If you have buttermilk, that is even better. Buttermilk makes the best ranch dressing, but alas, I do not often have buttermilk, but when I do, that is going to be some delicious ranch dressing. So just about a 1/2 cup of mayo, and then a 1/2 cup of half and half or milk. I find half and half gives you that richer like texture to your dressing, which is really great for dipping, and then it's just a little bit nicer. Let's check out these guys. Looking beautiful. Got this nice kind of golden coloring to our chicken tenders. So I'm going to flip them over. This has this, being very careful. I try to only flip them once on each side. When I'm frying them, this needs a little bit longer. I'm going to let these guys fry a little bit more, and I'm going to rotate, and then I'll flip them. But try not to play with your chicken when you're frying it, because you're going to risk having your breading fall off. Now that dredging and then the flour coating has a good stick on it, but again, you don't want it to fall off. Okay, I'm going to add in the rest of my half and half to get me to about a cup. And then we are going to add in our ranch dressing mix, and then I'm going to add in a little bit of green onions and some parsley, so I'll have a nice little fresh herbiness to it as well. But I want to do this now because it needs a minute for it to kind of thicken up, but just a good old ranch packet. Sometimes I make mine completely on my own using like onion powder, garlic, salt, and then fresh herbs, but you can't beat a good ranch packet. They work well, and it goes so good in your chicken. So I've got some fresh parsley here. We're going to mince this up. Make sure it's nice and small, because you don't want to have any big chunks of leaves in there. Here we go. I'm going to add this in as well to our ranch dressing. And then before I chop up my green onion, I'm going to flip these two over that I had resting a little bit longer. There we go. But now they're cooking up beautifully with it. Now we've got I'm not going to add my really white part of my green onion. I'm going to keep some, because that's going to be too astringent in there. and it will be a bit too strong of an onion flavor. You can also use chives, would be great. If you have them, I had been searching for chives at to grow, and I have just not been able to find them. I used to have them grow naturally everywhere, but once you kind of start mowing for the season, you can't find them anymore. So we're going to mince this up, and this will add a nice little onion flavor to it, which I think just is so good. And it's just about a tablespoon. You don't need a whole lot because it packs a lot of flavor. So it's like a tablespoon of fresh parsley and a tablespoon of minced green onions. And then we're going to mix this up, and this is going to be our ranch dressing for both dipping our chicken and our salad. Or if you're like me, you're going to eat the chicken on the salad because it's so good. You see it's got a nice kind of thicker consistency, which is perfect for like the dipping the chicken in. Okay, let's get our salad going. We've got kind of 2 heads of romaine lettuce here. I'll pop them in. I'm going to do 1 cut down the middle so they're a little bit smaller and bite size. I find for a chicken tender salad or like this, romaine, iceberg lettuce, those ones that have a nice crunch on it, they're the best. But, you know, other salads lend themselves to different greens. But for this one, this is going to be the best. We're just going to do kind of a garden salad. So we got tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and some red onions. Mix these around. We've got our base on it. I've got 3 baby cucumbers, which always are refreshing in a salad. And we're going to cut the ends off of them. These baby cucumbers you don't need to peel because they have a nice tender skin. But I am going to have them so they're not super big chunks. And then we'll slice them up nice and thin. And then our first round of chicken tenders, I think, are just about ready to come out. You can hear them sizzling nicely. There we go. Beautiful. So I'm taking them out and I'm going to put them hot grease down. This is going to allow them to be nice and crispy. And because as soon as you can get that grease off of it, the crispier you'll have on your breading. There we go. So I've got them on there. And now we're going to do our next set of chicken into our bowl. Not our bowl, into our frying pan. And we're going to kind of lay this out. I'm hoping we can get it all in. Here's my chicken tender snake. I have a feeling Teddy's going to want that one. There we go. And one more to kind of go in here. Okay, let's clear this out of the way because we're on the home stretch now. Let's finish up our salad. Our banana bread, I think, is going to be done any minute now. I am going to just, as I say that, it starts to beep. Let's go check on it and see how it is looking for it. I'm going to turn that up to 4.5. Let's grab. Got my cats today. Okay. Look at these gorgeous mini banana loaves with a little bit of a cinnamon sugar crunch on the top. You can tell they're done is when you touch them and they don't squish down too much. If you pull it out and they are still really soft and kind of pushy on the top, put them back in for a couple of more minutes. But these are gorgeous. So we're going to put them right up here. But this, you know, we made this using our sourdough discard. So a whole cup of sourdough discard in it, which is great. But the best thing is, you see we've got the cinnamon sugar crust on the top. That's with the paired with the cinnamon inside the batter is going to give it a more like homey banana bread flavor. You know, something a little bit different than the traditional banana or banana nut, banana chocolate chip. This is the banana cinnamon sugar banana bread, and it's going to be so delicious. I think it's going to pair well, similar to my banana donuts that I make that are like my kids' favorite thing.
Your request to go over the breading for the chicken?
Yes, so the chicken breading is fairly simple. And we will upload our video to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate this at home, you can always check there as well. But I used about 1.5 cups of flour, and then I added about 2 tablespoons of onion powder, a tablespoon of paprika, a tablespoon of garlic salt, about 1.5 tablespoons of Mrs. Dash's table blend, a teaspoon of black pepper, and then half a packet of ranch. And then you kind of mix that up, you dredge everything, and then after you've dredged the chicken one time, you're going to add in about 1 cup of seasoned panko breadcrumbs, and then you just do the egg wash where you take your dredged chicken through the egg, and then you coat it with all that and you fry it up. So pretty easy, pretty simple, but a lot of flavor and delicious. We've got our peppers in here, our sweet peppers, kind of go in our garden salad. And then I'm going to use just a smidge of red onion. You don't need a whole lot, but for salads, red onions are your best friend. You don't want to use white onions or yellow onions. They're too astringent in flavor. So kind of red onions are perfect for this. I'd say a lot of people don't know the difference in onions and cooking. Red onions are really only meant to be eaten, like used raw. They lose their flavor when you saute them or fry them up. So they're best used on salads or burgers or in dips. But yellow onions are best for frying and sauteing. Let's get these guys flipped over. Looking good. Pretty nice. Perfect. We are. I get my long one. I'm going to rotate over here. I'm going to turn it down just a smidge. Get these crisping up. But this nice golden color that we're talking about, this is from that paprika in the breading, because if you don't add the paprika in, you're going to have a lighter colored fry. So this gives you that more homey golden one with a really mild savory flavor to it. Okay, let's add in our tomatoes. I'm going to take about a bunch of these. We'll just run them under water real quick, and then we'll slice them up in here. So I'm just going to have them. If your knife is slipping and sliding on your tomatoes or your peppers or onions, those are the 3 foods that when I'm slicing, I know my knife needs a sharpening up, is if they snag or catch. That means your knife is dull. Just sharpen it up and it'll be back good as new. But I find peppers, onions, tomatoes, they have that skin on it that if your knife isn't sharp, it loves to just catch on. So we got our beautiful kind of fresh salad here made up. We turn, our chicken's almost done. We're going to get ready for our lunch. Always like to have a nice kind of fresh fruit with it. We did our big kind of Costco haul and everything. And if you're not familiar with this is a yellow honeydew melon. So it's actually a bit sweeter than honeydew, but it doesn't have the musky flavor like cantaloupe. So it's a really lovely melon that I think my kids absolutely love. We had some on our camping trip. And then I'm like, oh, I'm hoping they're in Tennessee now, because they're really only come out during the summer. Because they're not as popular a variety as cantaloupe or honeydew, or and regular honeydew. Okay, let's get that parsley off. Now my trick, for saving money and cutting up my own fruit, is cut it up yourself. It makes it easier if you just slice along the sides like this. Look, your melon will lay flat, and then you can just take your knife and slide it under. So you don't have to be an expert at your knife skills. You don't have to know how to do like the arcing if you're just new to cutting, like or cooking in general. This just makes it a little bit easier if you just do that pre-cut, and then you can just slide your blade under while like pushing against your cutting board down. This cutting your own fruit will save you like half the cost of fruit. You know, to pay the grocery store to cut up your fruit, they can charge you 50 to 150% extra just to do something that takes you less than 5 minutes at home. You know, I feel like pineapple's the worst offender, even watermelon. They're all really cheap fruits, but you can cut them up yourself and save pretty penny. Okay. See how these are cooking up, looking good. These will be done in about 30 seconds. And then we can plate up our lunch today. We've got this lovely golden honeydew. And then we have our garden salad with our homemade ranch. So I'll get this. It's going to cut up half now, and then we will serve up because they are ready. Okay, so turn off my frying pan. And so we've got a nice golden crisp. We're going to put it hot oil side down so that it stays nice and crispy. There we go. And this is the big long snake one. Okay, we've got our chicken tenders ready. Let's plate up our lunch. I'll grab my tongs for my salad. Okay. Let's start with our gorgeous garden salad here. Just a basic, romaine, lettuce, tomatoes, kind of chopped up peppers and onions. And we're going to give a nice little drizzle of our ranch dressing over it. And it's a nice thick dressing that when you mix it up, it's going to have a lot of like flavor that will cling on. And then we are going to take our chicken tenders. So we've got our 2 chicken tenders. And then for those who love to dip it in, we've got our little dip for our chicken tenders. I love to mix mine up in our salad. We're going to add our fresh fruit, kind of balance out everything, our honeydew. And then last, but definitely not least, we have our banana bread made with cinnamon sugar. Now look at this. How beautiful. Oh, it is so delicious. It's already falling out. But this is going to be so good as a dessert and just to have around in there. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just search for what we cooked for. So we have, fried chicken tenders and salad. You can watch that video along with me again at home and cook along. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront. So if you saw any of the cooking gadgets we use, I have my pans, I have my baking sheets, I have everything in there you can just look at. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like